Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers. Because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD and working on a product to help people overcome these problems because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions.
Common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast. I've got a great guest today.
Dr. Neil G. Thomas. The Reverend Dr. Neil G. Thomas is the senior pastor of Cathedral of Hope of Dallas, called and elected by the 4,500-member congregation on April 12, 2015, following a year-long search.
He began his tenure in June of that year. We're going to talk about, various issues in and amongst and around his church and faith itself. So welcome, Reverend. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for the invitation, Richard. Glad to be here, and hope you're having a blessed day.
Oh, I'm working on it. We'll see. So tell me a bit about your background. How did you come to faith, and how did you become a reverend, and why?
Sure, that's a great question, and thanks for the invitation. So, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm actually not from the United States. Born and raised in the United Kingdom. One of seven siblings. I'm the youngest. I have an identical twin brother. We were actually early converts to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My mom and dad were converted to the Mormon Church, either just before I was born or very, very soon after I was born. And we were a family in the church for a long time. My mom and dad, however, separated and then ultimately got a divorce, and mom got the church and dad didn't. And so we remained in the Mormon tradition for many years. Actually, right the way through until my mom wanted to get remarried, and he was not a Mormon, and so was refused a wedding in the temple. And in the Mormon Church, weddings take place, especially between Mormons. They get sealed in the temple, and then, of course, you're sealed then in celestial heaven, which is one of the beliefs and traditions of the Mormon Church. My mom was refused that unless her husband was to convert, and that was not about to happen, and so we actually ultimately left the Mormon Church. I was around, I think, about 9 or 10 at that stage, and didn't actually return to church until I was a little older, and I was invited to a Metropolitan Community Church in my hometown in Bournemouth, England, by a friend, and I went to church that Sunday, and I've not looked back since. It's been embedded in my spirituality, and just have fallen in love with Jesus at that point. Gave my life to God, and then when I was about 18, felt a real strong call to Christian ministry, and so went to seminary after I was affirmed by that church to enter into the ordained track of the Metropolitan Community Churches. Went to seminary and graduated when I was 22, and I was ordained when I was 23. So I've actually been ordained now for 35 years and pastored 3 congregations in that 35 years. So it's something that I felt called to. It's something that I've had the great privilege to be employed to do, but also just exercising my faith in that kind of leadership. And it just is an ongoing experience of deepening my own spiritual relationship with God, and hopefully helping others to deepen their experience as well.
Was it difficult coming from the Mormon faith? Like, were you made fun of, or was it a big transition to Christianity?
It really wasn't a big transition. I mean, if Mormons believe they're Christians, and so that was not, I wasn't seeing myself in those ways of converting. But I mean, it is a different experience of Christianity. But I was young enough leaving that when I came into the MCC movement, I think that I was able to have a faith that was more my own rather than a faith that was given to me by my parents or by any particular church or tradition. So, and I think the essences are the same, the values are the same, the understanding of what it means to be a follower of Christ is the same. And so I don't remember being taken fun of, but as I say, for 35 years now, I've been, within Christian ministry.
So, okay. And you're preaching, I don't know, is there besides the obvious, is there a theme to your sermons? Are there particular issues that were really well received that you spoke about and preached about that you feel would be great to talk about on this podcast?
Sure. Well, I mean, I remember my first sermon when I was about 19 or 20. I tell people that I preached everything I knew about Jesus in 12 minutes. And when they said, well, what are you going to preach next week? I was like, oh, hang on, I think I've already preached everything I know. I say that in jest, but the central message of Christ is one of love. I mean, the whole essence of what Christ came to offer, wasn't necessarily to build a new religion, but was rather to, in some ways, revive folks who have been felt ostracized from the Jewish tradition, who perhaps felt that religion was irrelevant in their own season. And I see some of that in our own Christian practices today, that we find ourselves, especially in a culture where Christianity or certain brands of Christianity are lifted up and labeled in ways that I would say that we need to get back to that central gospel of this gospel of social justice, the gospel of love. I mean, if you look at the Beatitudes and Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, which I would say was Jesus' thesis, Jesus' mandate, you get a glimpse of what Jesus was trying to do then, and perhaps even what Jesus is still trying to do today through the church. Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who are persecuted for my name. The kingdom of heaven belongs to them, and not to, especially in our own culture, those who think they've got all the answers, think that they've got a life that's beyond reproach, that this central gospel of Jesus is one always to widen the table of welcome, to widen the table of hospitality, to widen the table of inclusion. And those certainly are the central themes that if you were to kind of look back over 35 years of Christian ministry, for myself, those are the main themes that I've tried to preach to hold to. And in some ways, I think the church is also supposed to be a countercultural experience of where culture is. It's a constant reaffirmation of living into those values. And calling people again to live more spiritually, more thoughtfully, more Christ-like. And so I would say that those are the themes. I mean, obviously, as now with the United Church of Christ, which is a more liberal denomination, not that MCC wasn't. Of course, MCC was too, but the United Church of Christ is really around this sense of justice, this sense of individual relationship with God through Jesus. And so I would say that most of my ministry really has been looking at the disenfranchised, those who have been left behind, and bringing them along and to establish and help them to find their own relationship with Christ.
How has your congregation come to reflect, your pastoring? Do you see that it's been changing when you look out on the audience, over the years? How do you see it changing? What do you see changing?
Most certainly, Richard. I mean, I think worship is supposed to be about transformation. And certainly if we have an encounter with Christ, then our lives have to be transformed. If transformation is not happening, then we must ask ourselves, are we just giving lip service to this, or are we actually embedding this theology, this understanding of Christ-likeness into our everyday living experiences? So, in my first parish back in Bournemouth, England, I came into ministry right at the very beginning of the peak of the AIDS pandemic in the United Kingdom. And so much of my work at that time was, burying folks who were dying of AIDS, building a parish at the same time, doing soup kitchens for the homeless, and establishing some of the first AIDS hospices outside of London, as well as night shelters for the homeless. And so, I see that there are evidences of our spiritual walk that are evidenced in social justice. That's certainly true in my first experience. In my second experience in Los Angeles, California, where I pastored the MCC there, the Founders MCC for 13 years. My first parish for 12, my second for 13. I see lots of evidence of people's lives being changed and transformed in the same ways that my life is being changed and transformed. This is not pastor-centric down. This is really about us in this together. I was there during the first fights around marriage equality and the Proposition 8. I also moved our congregation 3 times because we outgrew spaces that we were worshiping and owned worship spaces. And again, a lot of work with people with addiction, people living with HIV and AIDS, seeing the transformation of people's lives. And then now here at Cathedral, for the last 10 years now, this is the largest congregation I've ever pastored. We're about a 4,000 member congregation, about 1,000 in worship on Sunday morning. We're very, very active in the social justice. Again, that's part of the traits of my own ministry is around social justice and looking at the ways in which people live more fully into their call to be Christ-like. And if that's not the purpose of the church, if that's not the purpose of spiritual leadership, then I'm not really sure what it is. Because if we model our life after Jesus, when you look at the life of Jesus, when he called those first disciples together, a motley crew of folks from various different backgrounds, the call on their life was to emulate this Jesus that they walked with. And I really believe with all my heart that falling in love with Jesus, falling in love with God, falling in love with this sense of purpose that the power of the Holy Spirit gives to us is the transforming quality that I truly believe brings those values of Jesus to the very forefront of every decision that we make in our lives. Here at Cathedral, we have a huge ministry to those who are food insecure, to those who are homeless, to, again, the disenfranchised, the vulnerable, obviously the LGBTQ plus community, and most recently to folks who are leaving evangelical conservative churches because of the judgment and sometimes the hate rhetoric, and who aren't ready to give up on Jesus. They're not ready to give up on their faith, but they just can't sit under this leadership that often is judgmental. And, I happen to believe that if Jesus wasn't sent to judge, then I don't think any one of us was sent to judge either.
Before we continue, I've been personally funding the Finding Genius podcast for 4.5 years now, which has led to 2,700 plus interviews of clinicians, researchers, scientists, CEOs, and other amazing people who are working to advance science and improve our lives and our world. Even though this podcast gets 100,000 plus downloads a month, we need your help to reach hundreds of thousands more worldwide. Please visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click on Support Us. We have 3 levels of membership from $10 to $49 a month, including perks such as the ability to see ahead in our interview calendar and ask questions of upcoming guests, transcripts of podcasts you're interested in, the ability to request specific topics or guests, and more. Visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click Support Us today. Now back to the show.
How do you reconcile? I would guess you have congregants ask you, maybe they're gay or they're, something else. How do they reconcile the message from the Bible stuff with what they are?
Well, I guess it really depends on your own interpretation of the Bible. If I'm a follower of Jesus, I want to follow the words of Jesus. And there is nothing that Jesus says about homosexuality, not one thing. There, of course, we know people say that the Apostle Paul does, and there are some passages in the Old Testament. But I truly believe that LGBT people who have been rejected by the church and who are still sticking around the church actually have had to do a lot of reconciliation. I've had to do a lot of work from the tapes and the rhetoric of hate that we often hear espoused from the church. But let's just be honest. Here we are in 2024, and there is now no mainline denomination, and by that I mean Methodist, United Church of Christ, Anglican or Episcopal, Presbyterian. Now, of course, we know the more evangelical and conservative churches may not be at this place, although some of those are even moving now and being asked to leave the Southern Baptist Convention and other places. But there's no mainline denomination now in the United States that would believe that LGBT people are not part of the new realm of God. And so I would say congregations like Cathedral of Hope and congregations specifically within the Metropolitan Community Churches and others have really helped to change the face of Christianity. And there's still a lot more to do. I mean, we are finding now that there are more groups that are being left behind in Christian theology, especially conservative and right-wing theology. Women, divorced folks, others, people of color, who are the target of evangelical conservative Christianity and nationalism, as we know it in our country today, that is disenfranchising many people to the point that we are seeing a huge drop in people who not only aren't attending church, but who have abandoned any idea that there is a God. Because the church, in my opinion, has given a bad reflection of this Jesus who humbly walked the earth 2,000 and more years ago with 12 disciples, and who confronted the religious hypocrisy then, and I believe calls us to confront the religious hypocrisy today.
What do you know what happens to people that are made to feel unwelcome in a given Christian church? Where do they go? Do they just, like you said, they just cease to believe in God, or what happens to them typically?
Well, I think what we're seeing in the United States right now is a huge growing number of what we call nuns. And I don't mean that N-U-N-S, I mean the N-O-N-E-S. They're not affiliated to any denomination or to any local church. They've decided that they are going to be spiritual, not religious, and are finding a pathway on their own, which is a sad reflection on the church. And, I think institutions, churches, need to ask themselves some very deep questions about what they are doing and how we are representing this God of love. I mean, if you really believe in the gospel that says where love is, there is God, I think we're doing a pretty bad rap at demonstrating this God of love when we keep putting barriers to this notion of a Jesus who sat with a woman at the well and said, go and sin no more, go and or the woman who was caught in adultery and who challenged the religious leaders of that day and said, let you without sin cast the first stone. I mean, how do we reconcile, and I'm talking to us all, how do we reconcile what we do in the name of Jesus with this Jesus who demonstrates clearly and passionately and with compassion this ability to bring people back in? And, I look at the story of the eunuch who's on the chariot that day, and who just simply asked the question, what is preventing me from being baptized? And there was no thesis to answer. There was no confirmation. There was no catechism. There was no classes that he had to go through. They just stopped the chariot right there. They found water. They baptized him, and he was done. He was now sent on his way as a follower of Jesus. And that's not who we are as an institution. That's a sad reflection on how we've institutionalized our religion. And I talk to myself as well. I mean, I'm not just pointing fingers at others, but asking ourselves all the time, how is it that we widen this table of welcome? How do we become this radically inclusive place that I believe Jesus began more than 2,000 years?
How do you communicate that to congregants? Is it obvious, all are welcome? And, what do you notice about their reactions when you do so?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. We really do. We're very implicit about our all is welcome. We make sure that the communion table is open to all. There's no questions asked. Anyone can come down. I mean, I can't count on both hands the number of times I've been in churches when I've been on vacation or I've been at other times where it seems like the list of reasons that you can't come to communion is longer than the invitation itself. That's not our message here. Our message here is that all are welcome at the table. And what we discover in this church over and over again is that when folks come among us for the very first time, there's several reactions, but one consistent reaction is just tears. That people have never been in an environment where they have heard a message of God's love for everyone, and it's evidenced in the worship. It's evidenced by the people who are congregating, and in some folks who are wondering when the next shoe is going to fall, that someone's going to say something that just tells them that they're not welcome. And I'm grateful that we built a culture here that folks know. In fact, one of the comments that I get over and over again is that people tell me that the love in this place is tangible. You feel it, you can smell it, it's in the air. And that only comes from lives that have been transformed and changed, lives that have got a heart for Jesus Christ. They've got a heart for the community, a heart for people, and who are desperate to make a difference in the world, because we know that when we bless others, we're also blessing ourselves at the same time, and that's a God-given gift to us.
Quick question. You're a reverend. What's the difference? This may be a silly question. Between a priest, a pastor, a reverend, all these different names of, a deacon, et cetera. What does it mean to be a reverend versus a pastor? Anything different? Why the different name?
No, there's really nothing, Richard. They're just names that certain denominations have given to their spiritual leaders. So in my denomination, the United Church of Christ, I'm called a senior minister. And I'm called a senior minister because we have other ministers on staff. But, I'm a reverend. That's my honorary title. I do have a doctorate in theology, so doctor is my earned degree. But yeah, Reverend Dr, pastor, priest. Priest is really just a name for someone who is a bridge between humanity and God. That's the technical understanding. That's why we call the priesthood of all believers, that every one of us can be a priest in our own right, but there are certain folks who've been called out to spiritual leadership, and some are called pastors and deacons and reverends and all those sorts of things. It's just a title that is given for a particular role that we serve.
Okay. And how does your doctorate in theology color how you preach? What is it? How do you feel like you do it differently than others, maybe because of that degree?
I don't know if it makes me a better preacher. It certainly makes me a better student, and I think we're all learning as we go along. We're all learning through the experiences of being in, meeting people and knowing their lives and knowing how they live into the fullness of their relationship with God. But I do also believe that those of us who have been called to spiritual leadership should be the best equipped, and not just to speak from a personal experience. We speak from the history of culture. We understand the history of the Bible. We understand the context of Christian text as well as Hebrew text. And, I think we owe it to our people, to those that we are shepherding, to those that we have some kind of spiritual leadership over, to be the very best in our education as we possibly can, because often what happens is mistakes are made. And without real stewardship and knowledge of sacred text, of the Holy Bible, of where Jesus was contextualized within his own culture, I think that we can do more damage rather than offer this sense of liberation to people.
What do you mean? How would the damage come? What would be an example? Well,
an example is, we were just talking about, people using the Bible to condemn homosexuality. That's something that we've learned in our evolving culture, but there's no justification for that from the words of Jesus. There's no justification from, not even from the Hebrew Bible. I know people will say, well, there's the 6 club of passages, but there are 3 or 4 in the Old Testament and maybe 2 or 3 in the New that people lift up all the time. But when you actually know the context, when you actually know the biblical interpretation, when you know the Hebrew and the Aramaic, as well as the Greek, there is a clear indication that these Bible verses are an interpretation of a culture rather than a condemnation of 2 people of the same gender who actually love each other and are committed to each other in relation. And so I've seen more damage done. I've seen especially gay and lesbian people, who have completely rejected God based on bad interpretation. I've seen people commit suicide because of it or take their own lives. People are in addiction, mask the pain of some of the damage that toxic theology has brought to us. And, I think that we owe it to our people, as well as to the God that we say we worship, to repent, to turn away from those things that have caused such harm and such damage, to the point that we're seeing the church slowly die here in the United States. I think we're down to 64 or 63% of the population now say that they believe in God. And you have to ask yourself, what has the church done to chase people away rather than bring people in?
But what has it been like to minister to so many people over so many years? I mean, you see the good and the bad and the ugly of humanity. Does it make it more difficult to you? Do you have to rely more on faith in order to get through your day and not, quail at all the negative things going on? Like how do you feel?
I wake up every morning just energized and delighted to be able to do what I do. It's the greatest honor of my life. It's the greatest privilege of my life. And it's the privilege of pastoring, of being with people, walking alongside people, that has completely changed my life, as evidenced through the ways in which someone who has been so hurt, so damaged, or has no faith whatsoever, slowly but surely find the language, find the heart to open themselves up once again, or maybe even for the first time, to this presence of love, to this presence of God. And when you see that transformation happening over and over and over again, you just can't help but be humbled as a servant leader to be able to continue to get up every day with a sense of purpose, with a sense of knowing why you exist, and with a sense of giving glory to God, because it's really not about me. If it was really about me, that nothing would happen. But I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and I take that scripture to heart every single day. Nothing is impossible. I'm not here to fix people or even convert people, in my opinion. I'm here to walk my life, walk my journey. And as Jesus did with those disciples, walking his truth, walking his life, he transformed them into what became some of the early leaders of what we now know as Christianity. And I get to do that every single day. I mean, what more could bring me joy?
Oh, that's great. So, I mean, your faith has made you more of an accepting person of other circumstances and lifestyles, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Just of people, knowing that people are people, and we all fall short. We all make mistakes, but we believe in a God of grace and love and forgiveness and compassion. That is in some ways the God of second and third and fourth chances, and we don't need to give up on anybody.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent message. Very good. Where can people see your sermons? Are they recorded? Are they online? If they want to be with you in person, where can they go?
Absolutely. So we're Cathedral of Hope, United Church of Christ. Our website is CathedralofHope.com, and all of our worship services are broadcast live, as well as, of course, archived, so that people can join us at any time to their convenience. And of course, we live in a culture now where